What's up, I'm Will Putney, a record producer at Graphic Nature Audio. I got started in the music industry kind of young. I was always in local bands. I tried to run a record label that didn't work so well. I booked a bunch of shows around here. Music was always like the side hobby, or it was always my passion, but it was never really a career path for me. Through college, I was going to school for something else, and then I hooked up with Machine, the record producer, and wound up with just an internship over a summer at his studio. And I kind of fell in love with it, never really left. He kind of gave me the keys to the studio, so I was able to do my own projects, slowly learn through that whole trial and error, and then it all kind of just snowballed from there. The best thing about producing and mixing for me is when you're able to take a band who has something special about them or an identity and sort of bring out the best of that, enhance that. It's the thing that kind of excites me the most when I take on projects, finding that sound, or whether it's coming up with it together or it's just enhancing what's already there, playing to the strengths of the artists that you work with, and kind of nailing that lane and putting forward like the coolest possible project there. That's sort of the thing that gets me the most excited. One of the most challenging things I face when I'm recording or mixing is really finding the way to make that artist stand out. There's just a sea of so many bands and so many different artists all kind of doing the same thing, living in the same world, and there's a lot of responsibility on me as a record producer or a mixer to deliver something that's unique and original and game-changing. And I always see that as the biggest challenge when I take on a project. It's like, how am I gonna cut through the noise with this particular artist? The most important thing when I'm working on a record or producing a record or mixing a record is I want to make sure that the idea of the song, the important part, the good part, the meaning of the song translates to the listener, and kind of not get bogged down by gear or plugins, remembering that all the things that I use are just tools to actually create good sounding music or good sounds. And I think a lot of people get lost in the sauce of all that, and to me a lot of things come from great source tones. Nailing the source tones in any project is like where you get the best foundation, where you get the best production, the best mix. So I'm always like, I put a lot of focus and energy in that, and I really, take it upon myself. It's like that's the biggest challenge of any record, is to just nail what you're recording. Mixing gear has evolved tremendously since I first started. It was about 15, 16 years ago when I started working in studios. The digital age was basically new then. We were on computers, but they were nothing like they are today. Editing was a task. There were no real plugins that sound the way they do today. Nothing could really emulate gear the way it does now. And anything from amp sims to Pro Audio and all the tools that are at your disposal today, it was very limited. So it was more about make the best with what you have. As a young, aspiring producer, I didn't have access to a lot of those tools. So you were much more focused on like really trying to get good sounds with the limited tools you have. And now today it's like information overload, but it can be a great thing because you can pull up a laptop anywhere in the world and have all of the excellent production tools at your disposal. So it's really opened the doors for a lot of people on a creative sense. I think what makes my signal chains unique, it's not like I'm the only person that does this, but I do a lot of creative sound design in the box, but I also run it through a lot of analog gear. So it's a combination of being pretty heavy-handed on both sides. I know there's a lot of guys who work in the box, and there are a lot of more old school guys who are console guys, but I definitely really use both to the max. And I think, there's more sculpting and sort of fine-tuning stuff that I can do in the computer that I really can't do with analog gear. And in the same sentence, there's a lot of character stuff and sort of just general awesomeness that comes from some of this gear that isn't fully nailed in the computer yet. So the best of both worlds sort of put together is like this sweet spot that I found in my productions and mixing. I think it's why people like some of the stuff I do, but it's definitely what I see as sort of the evolution of my career and what I think is my best foot forward. On the analog side, my go-to chains, obviously my SSL console. I recently got that a few years ago, and I'm doing all my mixes on it. I'm loving it. Now it's become a big part of, my sonic footprint. There's a lot of cool outboard compression stuff. I do a lot of the heavy compression with outboard gear, things like the Allen Smart Compressor, an API 2500, the Chandler Zener limiter, the Unfairchild mastering comp. I can kind of rattle off stuff all day, but there are a lot of really cool go-to compression stuff where I've sort of found my signature sound using stuff outside of the box. My expansion pack, as far as what people can expect from it, I think if you're a fan of any of the production stuff I do, you'll really enjoy it because it truly is just a recreation of a lot of the channels, bus stuff, mix tricks, like everything that I would do to make a record. There's a version of it in this. So aside from just it really nailing the character of all the gear and stuff, it's also all those little steps where I meticulously build plugins, combine it with the digital analog, hybrids, mix setup, and from a production standpoint, it's really easy to just load any one of these channels and sort of see just this chain of work already taken care of for you. So it's a huge time-saving tool, and it really does capture the vibe of a lot of the stuff that I do at the studio. My initial tests with the Control Hub stuff was shockingly accurate to how well they translate. I was very skeptical because the sum of all these little moving parts that go into making some of these channel strips and bus stuff and individual elements in the mix, I was really shocked to see how accurate they were. A, to Bing some of this stuff versus what I had printed versus what the plugin does. I really couldn't tell the difference. If I mute the track and unmute it, I don't know which one I'm listening to. And that's usually a good indication that whatever it's doing, like it's doing something right. This is the type of plugin 15 years ago when I was starting that I would have killed for, to be able to have access to the way the gear sounds and the way things have been crafted so meticulously. The opportunity to just pull up a laptop and have access to this stuff is crazy to me. And I think people will really enjoy just getting a glimpse down some of those channels and a look into like how I sculpt mixes. And this is just a great tool for that. My favorite feature in Control Hub, the EQ is really powerful. Like it's a really good sounding EQ. The way it works as a pre-EQ and the way it works post the compressor, the ability to tweak both. But my favorite part is that it sounds like my gear, because that's gonna really streamline tracking stuff for me, being able to do remote stuff, sort of being able to pull the stuff up anywhere. I mean, that's definitely the best part. It's just the fact that it sounds the way I want it to sound. If anybody, takes a second to check out this plugin, obviously I really appreciate it. We put a lot of energy and work into it. And if you're a fan of the stuff I do, I truly think you'll like it.